In this, the age of cinematic universes, you would think that between the MCU, the Arrowverse, the DCEU, Godzilla/Kong universe, whatever they're calling that, and, well, less said the better. Anyway, you'd think that the prospect of seeing a set of well-established characters unite in one big event presentation would be old hat. It can be safely assumed that it has to do with the characters themselves and how they click with audiences singularly that we're eager to see how they would work together. It's always a thrill seeing how they learn to work together, but the genuine thrill is seeing how they clash. All these characters are headliners, they have their own movies and TV series, they can carry the limelight on their own, so it's always interesting to see how these big personalities mesh and clash. The most recent example to be released is the Netflix Marvel event series The Defenders, which marks the inevitable team-up of Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. With 5 seasons of build-up, the question naturally has to be asked, where did the Defenders ultimately fall on the quality scale? Well, as it happens, we at Narcotic Casserole have a quality scale, and it's called Less to More. And today we're going to see how Phase 1 of the Netflix Marvel series ascends on the quality scale from worst to best, with to spare, so without further ado, let's start climbing. While I definitely got more out of Iron Fist than many others did, I'm not going to pretend that it wasn't severely lacking compared to the other entries. While many accusing fingers were quick to blame Finn Jones for his performance, frankly, if there's any real problem with this series, it's not the acting. Hands down, it's the material. The writing on this one is just weak. It doesn't help that Marvel gave the reins to a showrunner with a less than illustrious history. It is blatantly clear that he was out of his league with this type of show. It's not enough that the fight scenes in the early episodes are choppy and staged. What's worse is that he had no idea how to make this character interesting and appealing. The problem with Iron Fist as a character is that, well, for all intents and purposes, the majority of his early problems were first world problems. And watching the story of a rich white guy reestablish himself and continue to be a rich white guy and butting heads with other rich white guys doesn't exactly scream, watch me, particularly in this day and age. The only way it was going to work was that Danny was written as a likable character that he is in the comics, and unfortunately, that's where the show fell flat. It was just plain humorless. For every sweet scene like Danny geeking out over stickers under a desk, we got 20 scenes of emo corporate melodrama. What little humor there was in the show came from mainstays like Jerry Hogarth and Claire Temple, with Colleen Wing being more than a welcome addition. Then there's the inevitable comparisons to Arrow, which had a very similar origin story. Difference being is that Iron Fist actually has powers. The only way that we could differentiate this show from that is the protagonist is different in tone and presentation, and, well, oh, for crying out loud, they even have tattoos. Ugh. While the show should be serious, and yeah, it is, having an equally serious lead tends to get monotonous, especially after 13 episodes. Fortunately, Season 2 has a new showrunner. Here's hoping this will mean a significant uptick in quality for the season to come. There is so much good in this season, but unfortunately those good elements are at war with each other. Overall, the writing is still sharp and the fight sequences are kicked up a notch from the last season. Most importantly, you have the absolutely wrenching first 4 episodes introducing us to the first truly great film portrayal of the Punisher, played with cutthroat precision by Jon Bernthal. Seriously, how did his performance in episode 4 not warrant awards consideration? And what's more, for a second season, it was kicking off a compelling conflict for Daredevil, where he's confronted with the possibility that his way may actually be ineffectual, a conflict which is exacerbated with the astonishing surprise appearance by Wilson Fisk. More than enough ideas could have been mined for this to fill an entire season. Unfortunately, by obligation, they also had to build on a story thread they alluded to in Season 1, a story thread which plays a vital role in later Marvel series, so hello Elektra! Much like the Punisher, Elektra is another character seriously in need of cinematic redemption, and Elodie Yung is perfectly up to the task, and her story arc is substantial enough to fill its own season. I assume you're seeing the problem here. Much like Iron Man 2, Daredevil Season 2 has too many good ideas that are being crammed into one package by sheer necessity. On one side, you have the story arc that involves the main cast and effectively moves all of them in very interesting directions, and even more so, characters that we used to loathe in Season 1, such as Ellison and Marcy, and they wind up becoming amazing characters in Season 2. On the other side, we have the story that moves the big story forward and offers a compelling narrative for Matt as he struggles with his double life. While they do an admirable job using this point to tie both story arcs together, unfortunately they are still two gargantuan story arcs that rightfully deserve their time in the sun. And while the season never loses momentum and is no less compelling than the prior season, Season 2, well, the separate story arcs is just too much for 13 episodes to bear. My first real exposure to Luke Cage was when they debuted him in Jessica Jones, and between then and when this series finally aired, I read the hell out of many of his recent runs in the comics, and he rapidly became one of my favorite characters in Marvel. So it goes without saying, I was seriously looking forward to this series, and a lot of it can be attributed to the fact that Mike Colter is Luke Cage. It would be so easy to portray a big, burly, urban superhero as a stoic brick wall, but instead, Colter's performance gives us a hero whose motivations are relatable and his charm is undeniable. Colter owns this show and imbues Luke Cage with the charisma to go with the badassery. Somehow he's able to walk into a scene and be a force to be reckoned with and diffuse impending violence with a simple bitch slap. Hilarious and totally wicked. Man-crushing on Colter aside, another success of Luke Cage is that it lives and breathes Harlem. This show lets you know from the dead beginning that Harlem isn't just going to be a setting, it's a character. It hits home how close-knit it is as a community. I'm not a New Yorker, but I'm positive that this may in all likelihood be an idyllic exaggeration. But I'll be damned if this show didn't make you genuinely care about every civilian caught in the crossfire. It makes for some compelling viewing as Luke fights to earn the goodwill of Harlem and wrest control from crime boss Cottonmouth and Mariah. Another win on this show are some of the villains. Cottonmouth and Black Mariah are absolutely vicious and have riveting backstories that actually subvert expectations. By extension, we even get an equally menacing henchman in the form of Shades, whose own history is closely tied with Luke's. However, it's his cold, efficient ruthlessness that makes him interesting to watch, and when you see where he ends up at the end of the season, you are angered, but you're also intrigued as to what sort of mayhem he and Mariah are going to cause in seasons to come. The weak link of the show is Diamondback. What's strange is that as a threat, he is formidable. Wherever he goes, people suffer. He even proves to be more than a match for Luke in a fight. So what diminishes him as a villain? Well, it's his motivations. They're childish, one-note, and uninspired. After you find the truth of his history between him and Luke, all you're left with is the thought that he's just a psychotic, well-funded child. After these revelations, all the horrors Diamondback causes just seem like overcompensating. And seeing as this was the big bad the season was building up to, it does weigh down the latter part of this season significantly. I posted a review about this one just recently, so for the broad strokes on that, feel free to check that out. So let's get deeper into this. Rightly so, this series avoided following the narrative structure of the Avengers. And all the characters actually feel like they've been profoundly changed by the events which have transpired. Luke was able to get closure for Dolores, and he's finally able to own the mantle of the hero of Harlem. For extra measure, he was also able to reconcile his past with Jessica. Jessica, meanwhile, finds herself ready to get back on the hero horse as she reopens the office at Alias. Daredevil, well, remember when I said... Well, Matt's presumed dead after a last-ditch effort to redeem Elektra, fully aware that he probably won't come out of this alive. And he makes Danny promise to protect New York in his absence, leaving Danny with a stronger focus of his true purpose as the Iron Fist. The Defenders is a strong apex of all four of the existing Netflix series. It connects to all the four series seamlessly and never feels like a cheap ratings grab. You definitely feel like these characters needed to reach this point in order to move on from the doldrums they all landed in at the end of their respective series. More importantly, it doesn't end as clean as the Avengers did. Some characters didn't walk away from this intact. Well, you have Karen and Foggy, they're now living with the sadness of Matt's dubious demise, and worse, let's not forget that now, Misty is one arm short, effectively cutting her career as a police officer. This team-up series is exactly what you'd expect from the darker side of the MCU, and while it's different in tone and content, the emotions you feel watching these characters team up is the same as their family-friendly peers. So, what keeps this from the top spot? Simple. The other series can actually stand on their own. All of the other series have their own themes that apply to their respective protagonists. Daredevil is a crime drama, Jessica Jones is a film noir detective series, Luke Cage is an urban drama series, and Iron Fist, they're still working on that. The Defenders is awesome, but that's because of the build-up from the previous series. You can't just jump in from here. The joy you get from watching this is the payoff you get from investing your time to the series before. But hey, it's a hell of a payoff. Oh, what to say about this show that hasn't already been said. I have re-binged this season multiple times and I still can't find fault in it. Like its protagonist on a high rise, this season is so well balanced. The writing is sharp, the suspense is palpable, the cast is A-grade on their A-game. The fight choreography is still some of the best since Arrow and the camera work complements it. But you've heard all that and were probably saying it long before you clicked. So what I can say is that around the time this show premiered, the MCU was being accused of sticking to one type of tone, the fun-for-all tone, which for all heroes portrayed in the movies is fine. However, there are a lot of heroes who seldom fit into that particular aesthetic. While in the comics we've seen them take part in combating countless otherworldly threats, these heroes just belong in the streets, down in the muck, dealing with big problems on a smaller battlefield. That's what Daredevil did. Much like what Torchwood did for Doctor Who, Daredevil showed the darker side of a presumably brighter universe. While the Avengers fought off intergalactic threats from above, Daredevil was the first MCU character to remind us that there's gotta be someone there to fight the criminals, the gangs, and the mobsters who poison the streets with drugs, murder, and chaos. Daredevil Season 1 dared to show us this darkness with boldness and guts, literally and metaphorically, and open the floodgates for all the other street-level heroes to come. Sometimes to make a hero interesting, you don't have to make him fight a god. Sometimes a ruthless gangster with godlike aspirations works even better. When a hero looks around and sees bad stuff going on down in his doorstep, you find yourself able to relate more to the hero who steps up and fights with nothing more than a steely nerve and whatever skills he's got. When you remember that Daredevil originally started with swap pants, a track shirt, and a rag on his head, it does bring it all close to reality, doesn't it? The one common thread with all the Defenders is that they all have come from dark places where they suffered and were forced to rise from adversity. Iron Fist lost his family at a young age and had to learn to fight under harsh conditions as an outsider in order to survive. Luke Cage had only a strong moral code to keep him from cracking when he was unjustly incarcerated at Stormcage. It was only by divine chance and the goodwill of Reva Connors that he was able to survive with his newfound abilities. Matt Murdock would have been driven to madness by his heightened senses had not Stick arrived to teach him how to hone his gifts. Jessica Jones didn't have any of those luxuries. Even before she lost her family, Jessica was always an outcast. Gaining super strength just made her even more of one. Being adopted into an abusive household didn't improve her ardor either. Then, when she finally decides to use her gifts for good, she impromptu runs afoul of one of the most depraved villains the MCU has ever produced. Jessica Jones is probably the most unflinchingly harsh series in the Netflix lineup for the simple fact that it's not about fighting crime and making the world a better place. It's about dealing with personal horrors and somehow still being able to muster what little willpower you have to do the right thing. Jessica didn't have Foggy, Karen, Stick, Claire, Reva, or Colleen Wing to help her cope. Sure, she had Trish, but not her or any of them could understand the pain and degradation Jessica suffered at the hands of Kilgrave. It's not something you can wipe away like cheap makeup. This is a series that fearlessly tackles the horror of having your body and soul ravaged, and you are powerless to stop it. The writing takes the dramatic potential of a mind-controlling villain and takes it to a place that has no problems making you uncomfortable. Beyond entertainment, superheroes, and daring do, Jessica Jones is a show about a woman who is hanging on by a thread. She may be able to lift a car, but she's still vulnerable in the beginning of the show, and this first season focuses on her fighting through trauma in order to protect everyone around her from her own personal purple demon. This was a show that seriously wanted to look past the spectacle of the superhero genre and portray a character that was relatable on a genuinely uncomfortable level, and the cast, writers, and directors had no problem taking you down this road. This level of bravery is exclusive strictly to this show, and for that reason, that's why it's #1 on our list. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think the best is yet to come for the MCU Netflix lineup? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and for more addictive content on Narcotic Casserole, simply like, share, and subscribe for more content. Click, and thou shalt be served.